I found 5 condoms in my husband's car. What I did changed everything. This version follows the tone and structure from the deep analysis. Emotionally raw, cinematic, suspenseful, and safe. No harmful or instructive detail. ##### Chapter 1. The Glove Compartment. The morning started like any other. I was late, juggling my coffee, my bag, and the sense that life had quietly slipped into repetition. Darius had taken my car the night before. He said he needed to fill it with gas. When I climbed in, the air smelled faintly of his cologne. It made me smile at first. Then I reached for the glove compartment to grab my phone charger. The small box sat there, perfectly centered among crumpled receipts and insurance papers. 5 silver packets. I froze, staring at them as though my brain needed time to translate what my eyes were seeing. My heart didn't pound. It went silent. The quiet kind of shock that drains all color from the world. I picked one up, turned it over. Sealed. New. 5. We hadn't used condoms in years. My hands began to shake, not from rage yet, but disbelief, the kind that wraps you in numbness. I placed them back exactly how I'd found them, as if touching them too long would burn me. For a moment I just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, eyes on the dashboard clock ticking toward nothing. The street outside was still. A child crossed the road with a backpack. The normal world moved on, but mine had tilted. Every shared smile, every lazy Sunday, replayed in fast motion behind my eyes, and each memory felt counterfeit now, rewritten by those 5 shining pieces of evidence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt something colder, a clarity that bordered on cruelty. In that quiet car, I promised myself I would not confront him with tears. Not yet. Tears would give him power. No, I would wait. Watch. Learn the truth before deciding what to do with it. When I finally turned the key, the engine roared too loudly, startling me. The mirror caught my reflection. Calm face, steady eyes. I almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked composed, but beneath the stillness something dark began to stir. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the shock had hardened into purpose. Darius greeted me at the door with his usual grin, asking about my morning. I smiled back. And lied. Because now, the game had quietly begun. That evening, the house hummed with its usual noises. The dishwasher, the faint buzz of the TV, the click of Darius's spoon against his bowl. It should have felt normal. But every sound felt exaggerated, as if the house itself were mocking me with its calm. I moved through the rooms mechanically, setting the table, folding napkins, performing marriage the way an actress performs a familiar role. Darius talked about his day, a new client, a lunch meeting that ran long, traffic on the way home. He spoke easily, his voice smooth, unrehearsed. I watched him, searching for a tremor, a flicker of guilt. Nothing. His eyes met mine with the same warmth that once made me feel safe. Now, it only made me sick. Between sentences, he asked about dinner plans for the weekend. I nodded, pretending to listen, my fingers tracing invisible patterns on the countertop. I wondered if she would be there, the woman who shared his secrets, the one who made those silver packets necessary. I didn't know her name yet, but I could feel her shadow stretching into our kitchen. After he went upstairs to shower, I sat at the table and let silence fill the space he'd left behind. My heart felt too loud, pounding against my ribs, demanding an outlet. I thought of calling my friend Mara, the one who always told me not to bottle things up. But I couldn't speak it aloud. Once I did, it would become real, undeniable. Instead, I opened my notebook, the one I used for grocery lists and random thoughts, and wrote only 5 words. Asterisk, he's cheating. I know now. Asterisk. The ink bled slightly through the page, like it couldn't contain the weight of the sentence. When Darius came back down, hair damp, smile bright, he kissed the top of my head and thanked me for dinner. I smiled back automatically. The warmth of his touch burned, not from love but from the lie beneath it. That night, I lay beside him, listening to his even breathing, my eyes open to the dark. I didn't cry. I didn't reach for him. I made a quiet vow instead. I would not confront him in anger. I would collect my evidence, piece by piece, until he could no longer hide behind charm. The house slept. I did not. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was silent except for the soft rhythm of Darius's breathing beside me. For a long moment, I just watched him, the familiar slope of his shoulder, the faint line of worry between his brows. Once, I would have brushed that line away with a kiss. Now, I saw only deceit disguised as peace. When he left for work, I followed his car from the window until it disappeared down the street. The silence he left behind wasn't empty. It was electric. My mind pulsed with questions that wouldn't stop circling. Asterisk who? Since when? How many lies have I lived inside? Asterisk. I made coffee but couldn't drink it. My hands trembled too much. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out my phone. For the first time in our marriage, I opened his social media accounts, scrolling through photos, comments, messages. Nothing obvious, but too many smiles that didn't belong to me. Then, finally, a name I didn't recognize. Tiffany. A heart emoji next to her message. My stomach turned. I should have felt broken. Instead, I felt steady, disturbingly steady. That calm, cold part of me that had awakened in the car 2 days ago was now fully alive. It whispered that betrayal deserved a mirror, that sometimes justice didn't come from the truth, but from the sting of consequence. So I acted. I won't describe the act itself. It was simple, deliberate, and irreversible. No shouting, no chaos. Just a quiet moment of decision carried out with precision. The kind of moment that changes everything while looking, from the outside, like nothing at all. Afterward, I sat in the same chair, staring at the clock, feeling neither guilt nor triumph, just stillness. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm, when the air is too heavy to breathe. That evening, Darius came home later than usual. He smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. I asked if he'd eaten. He said yes. I smiled, nodded, and poured myself another cup of coffee, though it was long past midnight. When he finally went to bed, I stayed in the living room, watching the shadow of his car through the window, waiting for what I knew was coming, the consequence of a choice I could no longer undo. The call came 2 days later. I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed, Darius's name flashing across the screen. His voice was tight, trembling with confusion. Something happened, he said. I can't explain it. There was noise in the background. Chatter, maybe panic. Before I could respond, he hung up. For a moment, I just stood there, the shirt in my hands forgotten. My pulse quickened, but I forced myself to keep folding. I had known this moment would come. I just didn't know it would feel this strange. Not satisfying, not vengeful, just heavy. By evening, the story had started its slow, poisonous spread. A friend from his office texted me in vague concern. Asterisk, is Darius okay? Heard something happened at work. Asterisk, another message followed, full of gossip disguised as sympathy. I didn't reply. The wildfire had started, tiny sparks turning into flames across whispers and screens. When Darius came home, he looked smaller. His confidence, that effortless charm, had vanished. He avoided my eyes, moving around the kitchen as though the air itself might accuse him. I almost pitied him. Almost. Rough day? I asked quietly, keeping my tone even. He hesitated. Yeah, just bad luck. Bad luck. That was the phrase he chose. Not confession. Not truth. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. That night, I overheard him on the phone in the hallway. Low voice, rushed words, the name Tiffany whispered like a curse. Whatever had happened between them had become public, messy, undeniable. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. The victory I imagined didn't taste sweet. It tasted like ash. In the days that followed, people looked at me differently, with pity I hadn't asked for. At the grocery store, at the gym, everywhere I went, eyes lingered too long. I had wanted him to feel the humiliation, not me. But pain doesn't stay where you put it. It spreads, seeps into every corner of your life. That night, as Darius sat silent at the dining table, I finally understood the weight of what I'd done. I hadn't just broken him. I'd broken something inside myself, too. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, carrying whispers I could no longer control. The fallout came faster than I expected. Within a week, Darius's name was being whispered in offices, coffee shops, and even among our friends. Whatever had happened with Tiffany had reached the surface, like oil rising through clear water. His company suspended him, pending review, and his phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages he never answered. One morning, I watched him sitting at the dining table, head in his hands, staring at a cup of coffee gone cold. His shoulders trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. For years, I'd seen him as untouchable, the man who always had a plan, the one people admired. Now he looked like someone who'd forgotten how to breathe. I told myself he deserved this. Every ounce of humiliation, every sleepless night. Yet as I looked at him, I felt something unexpected pressing at my chest. Pity. Not forgiveness. Not even regret. Just the realization that revenge had a way of spilling beyond its target. By noon, there was a knock at the door. It was Tiffany. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup uneven. I'd imagined this moment countless times. How I'd confront her, how I'd let her feel the sharpness of my anger. But standing there, she didn't look like a rival. She looked like a frightened child caught in a storm she never saw coming. "I didn't know," she whispered. "He told me you were separated. Please believe me." Her voice broke on the last word. I didn't answer. I simply stepped aside and let her see Darius sitting there, hollow-eyed, defeated. Whatever she'd come to say died on her lips. She left without another word. The door clicked softly shut, a sound that felt heavier than any argument could. That evening, Darius tried to speak. "It wasn't supposed to," he began, but his voice collapsed under its own weight. I turned away. There was nothing left to explain. As the night deepened, I sat alone on the porch, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. The satisfaction I'd once craved was gone. In its place was silence. Deep, echoing silence, and the faint realization that I'd become someone I no longer recognized. Revenge had ended, but the damage had only begun. 3 days passed before Darius finally spoke more than a sentence to me. The house had become a museum of silence, every word replaced by the scrape of chairs, the click of doors, the echo of what neither of us dared to say. That night, as rain pattered against the windows, he came into the living room. He looked older, smaller. His voice trembled when he said, "We need to talk." I didn't answer. I simply turned down the TV volume and waited. He sank into the armchair opposite me. "I messed up," he said quietly. "You know that. But it wasn't what you think." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Isn't it?" "Because I found proof, Darius. 5 proofs, to be exact." He rubbed his temples, exhaling shakily. "It wasn't love," he said. "It was distraction." Everything felt like it was slipping. The mortgage, the business, us. I was drowning and she was just there. His voice cracked on the last word. For the first time, I saw something genuine flicker in his eyes. Not guilt, but exhaustion. "You could have talked to me," I said softly. "Instead, you lied." "I didn't know how," he whispered. "You stopped looking at me like I mattered." The words landed sharper than I expected. I wanted to hate him, to stay angry, but part of me heard the truth inside his weakness. I'd built walls too, walls of quiet resentment and pride. Neither of us had been honest long before Tiffany existed. A sudden knock interrupted us. I opened the door to find Tiffany standing there, drenched from the rain. She didn't look defiant, she looked broken. "I came to apologize," she said, voice trembling. "I didn't know the whole story. He told me it was over between you two." Her eyes darted to Darius, then back to me. "I ended it the moment I found out." For a moment, none of us spoke. The air was thick with something heavier than anger, truth. Raw, messy, and late. When she left, Darius looked at me, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." I wanted to scream, to forgive, to do anything but stand there in that unbearable quiet. Instead, I turned away, realizing that revenge, guilt, and love had all blurred into something I could no longer name. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the world still felt gray. Darius slept on the couch. The blanket had slipped to the floor. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching him in the pale light. His face looked peaceful, almost boyish, the same face I'd once trusted with my entire heart. But now, all I could see was distance. When he woke, there was no anger left in me, only exhaustion. "We can't keep doing this," I said. My voice sounded calm, foreign. "Whatever we were, it's gone." He sat up slowly, his eyes red. "So that's it? 20 years, just done." "It wasn't 20 years, Darius," I replied quietly. "It ended the moment you stopped being honest. The rest was just pretending." He rubbed his face, trying to find words. "I made a mistake." "No," I cut in. "You made choices." Silence stretched between us, heavy and final. The house that once held laughter now felt like a graveyard of echoes. He nodded, just once, as if surrendering to something inevitable. By evening, he had packed a suitcase. No shouting, no dramatic goodbye, just the slow zip of the bag, the sound of shoes on hardwood, the click of the front door closing behind him. I stood there long after he left, staring at the space he'd occupied for years. It was strange how absence could feel louder than presence. The days that followed blurred together. Papers were signed. Accounts divided. Friends offered pity in tones meant to sound supportive. I smiled through it all, because what else was there to do? The woman who had once believed in forever was gone, and in her place stood someone colder, sharper. Someone who understood that love could rot from the inside out without anyone noticing. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in the empty living room, sunlight pooling on the floor. A box of photos lay beside me. Our wedding picture stared back. Two people smiling, unaware of how fragile happiness really is. I slid it back into the box, closed the lid, and whispered to no one, "We broke long before the end." For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to cry. Not for him. For the person I used to be. Months had passed, and the air around me felt lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because I'd finally stopped trying to fix it. Darius and I barely spoke except through lawyers, and even that had become routine. But one afternoon, I received an email from his company's HR department, a formal apology for how they'd handled the incident. It was short, impersonal, and yet it stirred something in me. For so long, I had let pain define me. Now, for the first time, I wanted to define myself. That evening, I opened my laptop and began writing a piece titled Asterisk, The Quiet Cost of Betrayal. Asterisk, it wasn't about him, not directly, but about women who lose themselves while trying to hold broken relationships together. It poured out of me like a confession I didn't know I needed. When I finished, I sent it to a women's magazine, and forgot about it. 2 weeks later, the editor called. She wanted to publish it. When the article went live, it spread faster than I ever imagined. Messages flooded my inbox. Women who'd been lied to, dismissed, abandoned, all thanking me for saying what they couldn't. It wasn't fame I felt. It was freedom. For the first time, I had taken my pain and turned it into something that didn't destroy. It revealed. One day, Darius called. I almost didn't answer. His voice was quiet. "I read your piece," he said. "You made me see things I didn't before. I'm sorry, truly this time." There was a long pause before I replied. "I don't need your apology," I said softly. "I just need both of us to live with the truth." That was the last time we spoke. Standing at my window that night, I watched the city lights flicker, tiny, fragile sparks against the dark. It struck me then, revenge had burned everything down, but writing had rebuilt something inside me. It was a different kind of payback, not destruction, but clarity. 6 months later, my life didn't look anything like the one I'd planned, and maybe that was the point. The house was smaller now, filled with sunlight and plants that I actually remembered to water. The walls no longer echoed with arguments or pretense. They breathed. I had started teaching creative writing at the community center. Mostly women who had lived enough pain to fill novels. On the first day, I told them, stories don't heal everything, but they help us remember that we still exist. Their faces softened, and in their eyes, I saw pieces of myself, the version that had once been lost. One evening, after class, I stopped by the cafe near the old park. As I waited for my drink, I saw Elias, an old friend from years ago, sitting alone, reading. He looked up and smiled, that warm, steady kind of smile that doesn't demand anything. We talked until the cafe closed, laughter blending with the hum of soft music. It wasn't romance, not yet. Just possibility, fragile and real. Driving home that night, I took the long way, past the street where Darius and I once lived. The house looked the same, but it no longer hurt to see it. Some ghosts fade when you stop feeding them. When I reached home, I stood by the open window. The night breeze carried the scent of rain, cool and clean. For a moment, I closed my eyes and breathed. Deeply, freely. The past hadn't disappeared. It still lived somewhere inside me, quieter now, like an old scar that no longer throbs. I didn't forgive Darius completely, but I forgave myself. For loving, for hurting, for surviving. As I turned off the lights, I whispered to the darkness. This is what peace feels like. The wind moved through the open window, brushing against my skin. Gentle, alive. And for the first time in a long, long while, I smiled. Not because the story ended perfectly, but because it was finally mine.